they mutually agreed to part ways with Bliss, but they said that they will make an announcement regarding the leadership of the club's technical staff in the coming days, which to me means they've got someone else now that's going to be a sporting director or a technical director that'll be announced that would have had the same role as Bliss or a higher role. Peter Vermees has talked multiple times this year about not really having any interest in having that kind of sporting director, technical director role attached to his role anymore. He's, even with the failure of the Gavin Wilkinson hire, even in that introductory press conference, Peter was very resigned to pretty much just wanting to coach and focus on coaching and being the best coach that he could for the team. And that was about it. On another radio show in town this week, he said that he had zero interest in ever becoming the technical director again. So, I think, there's obviously the club has said that they were going to look to fill that sporting director role. We've got about 3 weeks before the summer transfer window opens. We've asked Peter Vermees about signings, and he mentions that, he still is working on getting the budget from ownership. And it seems like ownership's been very focused on filling that sporting director role. They said that there was an open search, from the start of the season to fill that role. So I'm curious what that's going to look like and what other announcements may come in the coming days, weeks or so, however long that is. But to me, I think the biggest thing I would say, I don't know that this is necessarily because of poor results. I think, of course, they're changing, structure and the way they're doing things in the front office because of some of these results, not just this year, but over the last few years. But I think more so the, moving and parting ways with Bliss really shows that they've paved the way for changes to that technical staff that they've been working on. And this might be one of those things that has to happen for them to get the guy in to the building that they want to get in for that role.
Now, the team is in a position, because there's so many teams that make the playoffs, that, a little run and you can make the playoffs for sure. But it seems like they'd have to start in looking at this roster with so many players who will be departing potentially at the end of the year. It would seem like making moves for the short term would seem to be ill-advised right now when they get to that window.
Yeah, and I think, part of the thing, too, is they have an open designated player spot, and the majority of players that you're going to get coming from Europe that are going to have an impact, like Cucho Hernandez, right? Let's take this Columbus Crew game that we saw the other night.
Yep.
Cucho Hernandez came in for the Columbus Crew in the middle of the season. They spent a lot of money for him, but the only way he was coming was going to be in the middle of the season, because that's when the end of the European transfer season, they're at the end of their season moving into the next season, whereas MLS is in the middle of their season. So they're going to have more players, high quality in Europe, that are going to be able to be on the move, because they're not going to be in the middle of the season where the winter window comes out and you've got this very long time where you can make moves to build up your team. There's not a lot of people from Europe that are, especially high dollar players,
right?
High quality players like Cucho Hernandez or something like that. They're going to be even more expensive, or potentially you're not going to get them on a free transfer in the middle of the year, in the middle of the season like that. So, I think they can do some bigger things in these summer windows. I know in the interview that Mike Illig did with Sam McDowell, my colleague at the Star, said that they're looking at these next 3 windows. And I think, Peter Vermees has been very adamant and very, I wouldn't say adamant, but very, searching for the right word, but very
forthright,
intense that the next 2 windows are, he's called it the next 2 to 3 windows. So I think he wants to see some change a little bit sooner in the roster and some investment into some of those, that open DP spot that they have for the remainder of this year. That they can do something like that. So that they can go and make a change and at least get part of the ball rolling on this quote unquote rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. It's at this point it's a rebuild because you have 17 players out of contract at the end of the year or with options up. So it's like they're at a crux with the roster where they can make moves, and to spread it out over 3 windows is probably better, considering that 2 of those windows are when the majority of your high quality European players are going to be more likely to be available. So I think, for the sake of competing in 2025, at least 1 or 2 bigger moves should be hoped for, within this window. But I'd be curious to see what happens, who they hire, if they hire as sporting director, what comes next, because I think that'll really kind of shape the idea of what and where Sporting go with this window and the next.
Indeed, and I don't know if it's telling or not, there was no quote from Peter Vermees in the release about Brian Bliss's departure, but surely these are bad times for Sporting Kansas City, but really heady times for the sport of soccer this summer. It'd be nice if Sporting was playing well, because they'd probably be getting a bump from all the things that are going on. And let's talk about Copa America coming to this country, and games are being sold out that don't even involve the United States. There seems to be a real great sense of excitement for this. Of course, you got Messi playing in this particular event as well. But let's talk about last night's debut for the U.S. men's national team. It's really all about winning, but I'd have to say that in general, people probably found the team's performance against Bolivia lackluster.
Yeah, I think the score line would make you think it was lackluster. Right. I think
they had a bunch of chances. They did have a bunch of chances, yes.
Yeah, they had a lot of chances in this game, and they weren't as clinical with them. I think, Fuller and Balogun has been at striker has been a big question mark. He did not have the best year in Monaco, in France, and it had been a while since he scored for the men's national team, but he gets a goal in that game in a kind of a move that is okay, there's some confidence coming back. And then he does score another one, finishes a really good chance that was created, but the entry pass before the pass to him was offside, so it gets negated. And then, Ricardo Pepi comes in and gets a bunch of the same chances at the doorstep and missed all of them. So it's one of those where like, okay, you hope the clinical finishing comes, and maybe if Balogun plays longer in a game, he maybe bags a couple more of those chances for him. I don't think that in the first half they were particularly good at feeding Balogun in those spaces and in those chances. But, the biggest thing for me in that game was that the defense, for the most part, handled and looked very comfortable in dealing with any counterattacks from Bolivia. I don't think Bolivia had one shot outside of, or inside of like 20 to 25 yards. Made it very easy for, Matt Turner. Is a game that the U.S. should have won. They won. They get 3 points. And then they go to play against Panama, a team that they're very familiar with within their region. And I think you'd have loved to have seen them finish more chances in the second half. But ultimately, I think there was a lot of good things from the national team that we saw in that game, and you hope that you kind of build through these tournaments per se, and so you'll be building a lot to when they come to Arrowhead on July 1st and play Uruguay. But it was a showing that could have been better, but ultimately a good showing in that first game, especially to start off the tournament with the goal that Christian Pulisic scored was wonderful. That is a beautiful, beautiful goal. And he was really, really good, especially in the second half of that game. Has just been playing really well, and I think that's a good sign for the U.S. for the rest of the tournament.
Let's just ask a quick MLS question regarding these tournaments, and we'll talk about the Euros here in a moment, because that's been filled with crackers of goals, that's for sure. USA, not surprisingly, has only 3 players playing in the Euros. They have 39 in Copa America. Would you consider either of those totals enough?
I think it's kind of. I think it's a good total. The Copa America is hard, right? Because I think a lot of the U.S. international player pool also includes the amount of players from CONCACAF regions, right? Like some of the best Jamaican players are in MLS, and some of these teams, Panama has MLS players, Mexico, the U.S. has a couple of MLS players. I think, to the teams like Venezuela, they have a lot of MLS players. So the Copa America makes sense. The European one is hard because the Euros automatically kind of have this. There's a bit of a connotation with the American soccer player and the American league, and it just is what it is. And so I think the number you would like to see more. I think obviously if there were more CONCACAF teams involved, you'd see a higher number. Canada also has a very high number of MLS players on its roster.
Yes, they do.
So it'll be interesting to. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, right? Because the U.S. the MLS is still not a top 5, maybe not even a top 10 league in the entire world. Maybe kind of on that edge of a top 10 league, and I think with the amount of players for the U.S., especially that are playing in top 5 leagues in Europe, I think that probably is better for the national team in a way. But for MLS, I think they'd like to see those numbers a little bit higher per se. But it's still, I don't know. It's one of those where it is what it is with the amount of teams that are in this tournament. Obviously, if there are more CONCACAF teams involved, the CONCACAF Gold Cup sends much higher numbers. I think MLS sent over 100 players to the World Cup, if I remember correctly. So I think that's it. I think that is a good. Those are the numbers there that you're like, okay, that's what you want to see from Major League Soccer. But this one, the Euros is always going to be an interesting one because there's just that connotation of MLS and the American League. We saw it with Sebastian Giovinco back in the day, where he was one of easily the best player in the league for 4 or 5 years. Should have been playing with the Italian national team, and they froze him out, missed out on World Cups because they did not bring a very high talented, creative attacking player with them just because of the fact that he played in MLS and not over Europe. So they're still kind of fighting some of those, that concept about MLS and that the idea of what kind of league MLS is over there.
Well, let's talk about the Euros. It certainly has been fun to watch. I mean, there's good games every day. There's so many. I don't even know how people can consume as many. I mean, I've consumed quite a bit, but keeping caught up is a hard deal to do. There've been great games. There've been excitement. At the end of one of the games, I think it was the 2-2 tie involving Slovenia, I believe it was, the announcer, was a female play-by-play announcer, and she just screamed at the top of her lungs 3 times, "What a game of football! What a game of football!" I mean, there's been a lot of that. It's been pretty exciting and fun.
Yeah, and it's been very intense, very direct. Teams are just going at it. They're high. I mean, obviously, you don't want to see the collision that we saw yesterday on Sunday between the Scottish goalkeeper and the Hungarian player. Thankfully, he seems to be doing okay in the hospital, but had multiple facial fractures. You don't want to see that, right? But the challenges, the collisions, the players going in full speed for everything, the shots, the ambitious shots from distance that are flying into the goal at a ridiculous rate, much more so than the expected goal stat would ever tell you is possible. So it's one of those things where it's just been a phenomenal tournament to watch. And I think I'll say this too, these last couple of rounds of games have been really, really good because there's more on the line. And I feel like Copa America, it feels like a slower start because it's at those first games, but I feel like all the first games for the Euros that I watched were kind of, okay, ho-hum. That second and third game in the group stage is when things really start to kick off and get really interesting. And it has proved to be that way. I mean, yesterday's drama at the end with Germany getting the equalizer and Hungary getting a stoppage time winner to put themselves in a spot to maybe make the knockout round after everything settles is just phenomenal entertainment, phenomenal drama. And that's what you want in a major tournament. I thought the World Cup provided that. Mm-hmm. I thought the Euros have done that as well. And, I'm hoping for sure that Copa America's second and third games in the group stage really provides that too, because it has been a spectacle as more things are on the line. And players playing with heavy pride. You have Albania, Georgia, some countries that are not normally part of it are in the mix. Hungary, of course, yesterday. It's just been really, really fun to watch, and it's been great for the game of soccer.
Certainly has, and also the fans. Germany's a perfect location. It's kind of centrally located, so